I use it daily.
I use it daily.
Yo lo uso a diario.
I use it daily. She uses her phone.
She uses her phone.
Ella usa su teléfono.
She uses her phone. He uses a pencil.
He uses a pencil.
Él usa un lápiz.
He uses a pencil. We use this tool.
We use this tool.
Usamos esta herramienta.
We use this tool. They use a map.
They use a map.
Ellos usan un mapa.
They use a map. I used the last one.
I used the last one.
Puse el último.
I used the last one. She uses a fork.
She uses a fork.
Ella usa un tenedor.
She uses a fork. He used to sing.
He used to sing.
Él solía cantar.
He used to sing. We use that app.
We use that app.
Usamos esa aplicación.
We use that app. I don't use it.
I don't use it.
No lo uso.
I don't use it. She uses makeup.
She uses makeup.
Ella usa maquillaje.
She uses makeup. He used his skills.
He used his skills.
Él usó sus habilidades.
He used his skills. I'll use this one.
I'll use this one.
Usaré este.
I'll use this one. We use paper plates.
We use paper plates.
Usamos platos de papel.
We use paper plates. She uses her laptop.
She uses her laptop.
Ella usa su computadora portátil.
She uses her laptop. I use social media.
I use social media.
Yo uso redes sociales.
I use social media. They use their bikes.
They use their bikes.
Ellos usan sus bicicletas.
They use their bikes. He uses a calculator.
He uses a calculator.
Él usa una calculadora.
He uses a calculator. I use a spoon.
I use a spoon.
Yo uso una cuchara.
I use a spoon. We used to travel.
We used to travel.
Solíamos viajar.
We used to travel. She uses a camera.
She uses a camera.
Ella usa una cámara.
She uses a camera. I use my car.
I use my car.
Yo uso mi coche.
I use my car. They use water.
They use water.
Ellos usan agua.
They use water. He used a knife.
He used a knife.
Él usó un cuchillo.
He used a knife. I use a map.
I use a map.
Yo uso un mapa.
I use a map. She uses a brush.
She uses a brush.
Ella usa un cepillo.
She uses a brush. He uses a shovel.
He uses a shovel.
Él usa una pala.
He uses a shovel. I use a laptop.
I use a laptop.
Yo uso una computadora portátil.
I use a laptop. We use a projector.
We use a projector.
Usamos un proyector.
We use a projector. I use a filter.
I use a filter.
Yo uso un filtro.
I use a filter. He uses a ruler.
He uses a ruler.
Él usa una regla.
He uses a ruler. She uses perfume.
She uses perfume.
Ella usa perfume.
She uses perfume. I use sugar.
I use sugar.
Yo uso azúcar.
I use sugar. They use different methods.
They use different methods.
Ellos usan métodos diferentes.
They use different methods. He used his hands.
He used his hands.
Él usó sus manos.
He used his hands. She uses her time well.
She uses her time well.
Ella usa bien su tiempo.
She uses her time well. I use this app.
I use this app.
Yo uso esta aplicación.
I use this app. He used to work here.
He used to work here.
Él solía trabajar aquí.
He used to work here. I use a wallet.
I use a wallet.
Yo uso una billetera.
I use a wallet. She uses a pen.
She uses a pen.
Ella usa un bolígrafo.
She uses a pen. They use a generator.
They use a generator.
Ellos usan un generador.
They use a generator. We use this tool often.
We use this tool often.
Usamos esta herramienta a menudo.
We use this tool often. I don't use it anymore.
I don't use it anymore.
Ya no lo uso.
I don't use it anymore. He uses a spoon.
He uses a spoon.
Él usa una cuchara.
He uses a spoon. She used the oven.
She used the oven.
Ella usó el horno.
She used the oven. I use the internet.
I use the internet.
Yo uso internet.
I use the internet. He uses a stapler.
He uses a stapler.
Él usa una grapadora.
He uses a stapler. She uses the computer.
She uses the computer.
Ella usa la computadora.
She uses the computer. I used to live there.
I used to live there.
Solía vivir allí.
I used to live there. We use a vacuum.
We use a vacuum.
Usamos una aspiradora.
We use a vacuum. He used all the milk.
He used all the milk.
Él usó toda la leche.
He used all the milk. She uses a charger.
She uses a charger.
Ella usa un cargador.
She uses a charger. I use a blender.
I use a blender.
Yo uso una licuadora.
I use a blender. We use a timer.
We use a timer.
Usamos un temporizador.
We use a timer. He uses a microscope.
He uses a microscope.
Él usa un microscopio.
He uses a microscope. I used a fork.
I used a fork.
Usé un tenedor.
I used a fork. She uses social media.
She uses social media.
Ella usa redes sociales.
She uses social media. I use this regularly.
I use this regularly.
Yo uso esto regularmente.
I use this regularly. We use the same method.
We use the same method.
Usamos el mismo método.
We use the same method. He uses a hammer.
He uses a hammer.
Él usa un martillo.
He uses a hammer. She uses a phone.
She uses a phone.
Ella usa un teléfono.
She uses a phone. I used a towel.
I used a towel.
Usé una toalla.
I used a towel. We use this technique.
We use this technique.
Usamos esta técnica.
We use this technique. I use headphones.
I use headphones.
Yo uso auriculares.
I use headphones. He uses his skills.
He uses his skills.
Él usa sus habilidades.
He uses his skills. She used a mirror.
She used a mirror.
Ella usó un espejo.
She used a mirror. I use a notebook.
I use a notebook.
Yo uso un cuaderno.
I use a notebook. They use smartphones.
They use smartphones.
Ellos usan teléfonos inteligentes.
They use smartphones. I use this tool.
I use this tool.
Use esta herramienta.
I use this tool. She uses a sewing machine.
She uses a sewing machine.
Ella usa una máquina de coser.
She uses a sewing machine. We use different colors.
We use different colors.
Usamos colores diferentes.
We use different colors. He uses a projector.
He uses a projector.
Él usa un proyector.
He uses a projector. I use a credit card.
I use a credit card.
Yo uso una tarjeta de crédito.
I use a credit card. We use our phones.
We use our phones.
Usamos nuestros teléfonos.
We use our phones. She uses makeup daily.
She uses makeup daily.
Ella usa maquillaje a diario.
She uses makeup daily. I use a pen for notes.
I use a pen for notes.
Yo uso un bolígrafo para tomar notas.
I use a pen for notes. He used a wrench.
He used a wrench.
Él usó una llave inglesa.
He used a wrench. I used all the cheese.
I used all the cheese.
Puse todo el queso.
I used all the cheese. We use books for reading.
We use books for reading.
Usamos libros para leer.
We use books for reading. She uses a hairdryer.
She uses a hairdryer.
Ella usa un secador de pelo.
She uses a hairdryer. I use a toothbrush.
I use a toothbrush.
Yo uso un cepillo de dientes.
I use a toothbrush. They use an umbrella.
They use an umbrella.
Ellos usan un paraguas.
They use an umbrella. I used my ticket.
I used my ticket.
Usé mi boleto.
I used my ticket. We use this recipe.
We use this recipe.
Usamos esta receta.
We use this recipe. She uses an app.
She uses an app.
Ella usa una aplicación.
She uses an app. I use a filter for water.
I use a filter for water.
Yo uso un filtro para el agua.
I use a filter for water. He used a ladder.
He used a ladder.
Él usó una escalera.
He used a ladder. We use a coach.
We use a coach.
Usamos un entrenador.
We use a coach. I use this regularly.
I use this regularly.
Yo uso esto regularmente.
I use this regularly. She uses a ruler.
She uses a ruler.
Ella usa una regla.
She uses a ruler. He used the microwave.
He used the microwave.
Él usó el microondas.
He used the microwave. I use my phone.
I use my phone.
Yo uso mi teléfono.
I use my phone. They use a scanner.
They use a scanner.
Ellos usan un escáner.
They use a scanner. We use a projector.
We use a projector.
Usamos un proyector.
We use a projector. She uses glasses.
She uses glasses.
Ella usa gafas.
She uses glasses. I use a map app.
I use a map app.
Yo uso una aplicación de mapas.
I use a map app. He uses a key.
He uses a key.
Él usa una llave.
He uses a key. We use a ladder.
We use a ladder.
Usamos una escalera.
We use a ladder. I use a scarf.
I use a scarf.
Yo uso una bufanda.
I use a scarf. She uses a phone case.
She uses a phone case.
Ella usa una funda para el teléfono.
She uses a phone case. I used the car.
I used the car.
Use el coche.
I used the car. They use different colors.
They use different colors.
Ellos usan colores diferentes.
They use different colors. She uses a wallet.
She uses a wallet.
Ella usa una billetera.
She uses a wallet. I use a mug.
I use a mug.
Yo uso una taza.
I use a mug. We use a camera.
We use a camera.
Usamos una cámara.
We use a camera. He uses a pen.
He uses a pen.
Él usa un bolígrafo.
He uses a pen. I use the internet often.
I use the internet often.
Yo uso internet con frecuencia.
I use the internet often. They use a tripod.
They use a tripod.
Ellos usan un trípode.
They use a tripod. She uses a hammer.
She uses a hammer.
Ella usa un martillo.
She uses a hammer. I used a book.
I used a book.
Use un libro.
I used a book. We use different tools.
We use different tools.
Usamos diferentes herramientas.
We use different tools. He uses a chair.
He uses a chair.
Él usa una silla.
He uses a chair. I use a cushion.
I use a cushion.
Yo uso un cojín.
I use a cushion. She uses a cushion.
She uses a cushion.
Ella usa un cojín.
She uses a cushion. We use this chair.
We use this chair.
Usamos esta silla.
We use this chair. He uses a mat.
He uses a mat.
Él usa una alfombra.
He uses a mat. I use a cup.
I use a cup.
Yo uso una taza.
I use a cup. She uses a watch.
She uses a watch.
Ella usa un reloj.
She uses a watch. We use water.
We use water.
Usamos agua.
We use water. He uses an eraser.
He uses an eraser.
Él usa una goma de borrar.
He uses an eraser. I use my skills.
I use my skills.
Yo uso mis habilidades.
I use my skills. They use a pencil.
They use a pencil.
Ellos usan un lápiz.
They use a pencil. She used a credit card.
She used a credit card.
Ella usó una tarjeta de crédito.
She used a credit card. I use this pen.
I use this pen.
Yo uso este bolígrafo.
I use this pen. We use this for cooking.
We use this for cooking.
Usamos esto para cocinar.
We use this for cooking. She uses a belt.
She uses a belt.
Ella usa un cinturón.
She uses a belt. I used this method.
I used this method.
Use este método.
I used this method. We use a guidebook.
We use a guidebook.
Usamos una guía.
We use a guidebook. He uses a frying pan.
He uses a frying pan.
Él usa una sartén.
He uses a frying pan. She uses her phone for calls.
She uses her phone for calls.
Ella usa su teléfono para llamar.
She uses her phone for calls. I use it often.
I use it often.
Lo uso a menudo.
I use it often. We use a mouse.
We use a mouse.
Usamos un ratón.
We use a mouse. I use a lamp.
I use a lamp.
Yo uso una lámpara.
I use a lamp. He uses a table.
He uses a table.
Él usa una mesa.
He uses a table. She used a fork.
She used a fork.
Ella usó un tenedor.
She used a fork. We use the gym.
We use the gym.
Usamos el gimnasio.
We use the gym. I use a mirror.
I use a mirror.
Yo uso un espejo.
I use a mirror. He uses a bag.
He uses a bag.
Él usa una bolsa.
He uses a bag. We use a towel.
We use a towel.
Usamos una toalla.
We use a towel. She uses a brush.
She uses a brush.
Ella usa un cepillo.
She uses a brush. I use a pillow.
I use a pillow.
Yo uso una almohada.
I use a pillow. They use a bike.
They use a bike.
Ellos usan una bicicleta.
They use a bike. I use a sweater.
I use a sweater.
Yo uso un suéter.
I use a sweater. We use a heater.
We use a heater.
Usamos un calentador.
We use a heater. He uses a notebook.
He uses a notebook.
Él usa un cuaderno.
He uses a notebook. She used the key.
She used the key.
Ella usó la llave.
She used the key. I use the fan.
I use the fan.
Yo uso el ventilador.
I use the fan. We use a clock.
We use a clock.
Usamos un reloj.
We use a clock. He uses a glove.
He uses a glove.
Él usa un guante.
He uses a glove. She used her hands.
She used her hands.
Ella usó sus manos.
She used her hands. I use a razor.
I use a razor.
Yo uso una navaja.
I use a razor. They use a microscope.
They use a microscope.
Ellos usan un microscopio.
They use a microscope. We use a map.
We use a map.
Usamos un mapa.
We use a map. I use the printer.
I use the printer.
Yo uso la impresora.
I use the printer. She used to work there.
She used to work there.
Ella solía trabajar allí.
She used to work there. I use this card.
I use this card.
Yo uso esta tarjeta.
I use this card. He uses a ticket.
He uses a ticket.
Él usa un boleto.
He uses a ticket. We use paper.
We use paper.
Usamos papel.
We use paper. She uses a basket.
She uses a basket.
Ella usa una canasta.
She uses a basket. I use a coat.
I use a coat.
Yo uso un abrigo.
I use a coat. They use fabric.
They use fabric.
Ellos usan tela.
They use fabric. I use an umbrella.
I use an umbrella.
Yo uso un paraguas.
I use an umbrella. She used a pencil case.
She used a pencil case.
Ella usó un estuche para lápices.
She used a pencil case. We use a blender.
We use a blender.
Usamos una licuadora.
We use a blender. He uses a card.
He uses a card.
Él usa una tarjeta.
He uses a card. I use a pillow.
I use a pillow.
Yo uso una almohada.
I use a pillow. She uses a notebook.
She uses a notebook.
Ella usa un cuaderno.
She uses a notebook. We use a pillow for support.
We use a pillow for support.
Usamos una almohada para soporte.
We use a pillow for support. I used a brush.
I used a brush.
Puse un cepillo.
I used a brush. They use their phones.
They use their phones.
Ellos usan sus teléfonos.
They use their phones. He uses a remote.
He uses a remote.
Él usa un control remoto.
He uses a remote. I use a coat for warmth.
I use a coat for warmth.
Yo uso un abrigo para abrigarme.
I use a coat for warmth. She uses a towel after swimming.
She uses a towel after swimming.
Ella usa una toalla después de nadar.
She uses a towel after swimming. We use a projector for presentations.
We use a projector for presentations.
Usamos un proyector para presentaciones.
We use a projector for presentations. I used this recipe.
I used this recipe.
Puse esta receta.
I used this recipe. They use coffee machines.
They use coffee machines.
Ellos usan máquinas de café.
They use coffee machines. She uses a magnifying glass.
She uses a magnifying glass.
Ella usa una lupa.
She uses a magnifying glass. I use a stick for balance.
I use a stick for balance.
Yo uso un bastón para equilibrio.
I use a stick for balance. We use a photo frame.
We use a photo frame.
Usamos un marco de fotos.
We use a photo frame. He uses a tool to fix things.
He uses a tool to fix things.
Él usa una herramienta para arreglar cosas.
He uses a tool to fix things. I use a corkscrew.
I use a corkscrew.
Yo uso un sacacorchos.
I use a corkscrew. She used a napkin.
She used a napkin.
Ella usó una servilleta.
She used a napkin. I use a hairbrush.
I use a hairbrush.
Yo uso un cepillo para el cabello.
I use a hairbrush. We use a cutter.
We use a cutter.
Usamos un cortador.
We use a cutter. She uses gloves.
She uses gloves.
Ella usa guantes.
She uses gloves. I use a shopping list.
I use a shopping list.
Yo uso una lista de compras.
I use a shopping list. He uses an apron.
He uses an apron.
Él usa un delantal.
He uses an apron. They use a printer.
They use a printer.
Ellos usan una impresora.
They use a printer. I use a flashlight.
I use a flashlight.
Yo uso una linterna.
I use a flashlight. We use a ball.
We use a ball.
Usamos una pelota.
We use a ball. She used a lamp.
She used a lamp.
Ella usó una lámpara.
She used a lamp. I use a calendar.
I use a calendar.
Yo uso un calendario.
I use a calendar. We use new software.
We use new software.
Usamos nuevo software.
We use new software. He uses a pen to sign.
He uses a pen to sign.
Él usa un bolígrafo para firmar.
He uses a pen to sign. I use a wallet for money.
I use a wallet for money.
Yo uso una billetera para el dinero.
I use a wallet for money. She uses a lipstick.
She uses a lipstick.
Ella usa un lápiz labial.
She uses a lipstick. I use a clock for time.
I use a clock for time.
Yo uso un reloj para saber la hora.
I use a clock for time. We use a cup for tea.
We use a cup for tea.
Usamos una taza para el té.
We use a cup for tea. He uses a pencil to draw.
He uses a pencil to draw.
Él usa un lápiz para dibujar.
He uses a pencil to draw. I use my time well.
I use my time well.
Yo uso mi tiempo bien.
I use my time well.